Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're about to spend an evening in the underworld, but not the scary part. Not the screaming, lava-spraying, soul-sucking version. No, tonight we're easing into the off hours. That's right, this is what happens when Cerberus, the giant three-headed dog of the Greek underworld, isn't on the clock. Picture it. The gates of Hades are sealed shut. The iron chains looped loosely around the obsidian pillars, and the flickering torches casting dancing shadows across the stony plains. You're standing there, eyes adjusting to the glow, when he steps away from his post. 3 heads, 12 paws, 1 wagging tail, Cerberus himself. And he's off duty. You probably won't survive this in real life, what with the eternal death thing and all, but luckily this is just a story. A sleepy, slightly weird one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you all are nodding off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow the big pup well monster as he lumbers away from his usual haunt. Most mortals assume Cerberus just snarls at the souls of the dead and chomps on escapees. But the truth, Hades gives him shifts, actual shifts. 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Union rules, who knows? But after guarding the gates through a full moon cycle, it's time for a break. Cerberus pads down the obsidian walkway with a rhythmic clink of his steel paw guards. One of his heads is yawning wide with teeth, like cypress roots. Another's already sniffing the air for something edible, and the third, it's humming. Yes, humming. You'd think 3 heads would argue, but they're surprisingly in sync, most of the time. He stretches slowly, deliberately, and each neck cracks like the opening of an ancient tomb. One head scratches behind an ear while another glares at it. You're witnessing a synchronized ballet of limbs, fangs, and fur that would make a chiropractor weep. Now don't worry, he's not in a hurry. His off hours start slow. He knows how to savor the change of pace. The gate torches flare behind him as he walks away from his post, casting a long, multi-headed shadow over the cracked black earth. Historians still argue whether Cerberus was a purely symbolic guardian or an actual being rooted in ancient cult beliefs. Some saw him as a metaphor for the past, present, and future, others as the literal last obstacle between life and what came next. But right now, he's mostly thinking about snacks. You trail behind him, don't worry, he knows you're there. One head side-eyes you and snorts approvingly, like a tour guide dog who's just been saddled with a clueless intern. His tail, barbed and twitching, slaps a scorched pillar as he turns left into the lesser-known corridors of the underworld. Here's something you might not know in obscure Orphic texts. There are hints that Cerberus had days off, and some even claim he was allowed to wander parts of the upper world during festivals. Fringe scholars whisper about a night of reversal when Cerberus was sighted on Earth, sniffing hearth fires and curling up under olive trees. But tonight, he's staying local. He passes by a row of bronze statues depicting famous heroes, Achilles, Theseus. That one guy who thought it was a good idea to arm wrestle Medusa, spoiler, it wasn't. Cerberus growls low as he walks past the statue of Heracles, whose 12 labors included dragging him up to the mortal realm without so much as a thank you. Still a sore subject. The corridor ends in a low cavern lit by eerie blue fungi. This is where Cerberus clocks out, literally. There's a massive stone sundial etched into the cave wall. Not that the sun reaches down here, but still it glows when it's time, and now it pulses faintly. Break time. Cerberus sits, sighs, and gives himself a moment. You'd think a creature made entirely of nightmare fuel would be a bundle of rage, but honestly, he just wants some peace. maybe a little music, maybe to dream, because Cerberus dreams of open fields of thunder running across the sky of the time Dionysus let him sip from the sacred goblet. He puked for 3 hours afterward every head, but it was worth it. Right now, though, he's got a whole underworld to explore, a calendar of unofficial rituals to attend, and exactly 12 hours before his next terrifying shift begins. And you're along for the ride. You follow him quietly because even though Cerberus is technically off duty, he's still built like a siege weapon with fur, and he doesn't like being snuck up on. One of his heads swivels toward you now, and then not out of suspicion but just habit, like a retired cop checking exits at a dinner party. He pads softly into the Asphodel fields, the ghostly meadows where the average dead, those neither wicked nor heroic, spend eternity in neutral limbo. Think eternal DMVQ meets a mildly haunted nature preserve. Not too gloomy, but not a vacation spot either. And it's here in this eerie calm that Cerberus starts his morning stretch. The asphodel grass glows faintly under his weight, and ghost blades brush against his paws with no resistance. He lowers all 3 heads to the ground, front legs, outback arched, and lets out a growl so low it vibrates the air like a cello string. If you've ever heard 3 synchronized yawns, followed by 1 long neck pop, that's the soundtrack of this moment. It's a ritual, really. A triple stretch. Neck, shoulders, tail. Every vertebra gets its turn. Even his tongues, yes, plural, get a lazy flick. Watching this process is like witnessing a steam engine slowly come back to life. He trots lazily in wide circles now, loosening up the paws, rolling a shoulder into the soil just because it feels nice. Cerberus doesn't need to warm up. He's a deathless being with muscle memory forged in myth, but he likes to. And sometimes liking something is reason enough. Mainstream myth doesn't tell you this, but early vase paintings from Thessaly show Cerberus playing in the fields surrounded by souls. Not attacking, not guarding, just wandering like a very big, very multi-headed dog with somewhere to be and no rush to get there. As you watch him bound over a dry creek bed, every head alert in a different direction, you wonder, does he ever get bored? Apparently not. Because just then the Harpies arrive. 3 shrieking streaks of feathers and claws zoom overhead like supernatural leaf blowers on espresso. Cerberus perks up, tail wagging furiously, and bolts after them without hesitation. It's playtime. Now remember, Harpies are technically minor deities, spirits of storm and sudden snatching. But in the underworld they've become something like chaotic male pigeons with attitude problems. They swoop low, dart high, and scream insults you can't quite translate, but probably shouldn't. Cerberus loves this game. He chases them through the fog-drenched hedgerows, weaving like a panther, his paws barely touching the ground. Each head barks at different intervals, creating a bizarre polyrhythmic battle cry. One head is focused on tracking one's nipping playfully at tail feathers, and the third is laughing, yes, laughing, in a deep-throated rumble that sounds like a landslide giggling. And here's the kicker. He never catches them. Not because he can't, but because he's letting them win, or at least thinks he is. Fringe interpretations of Pindar's lost odes even suggest Harpies were once assigned to stimulate the Hound of Hades, a kind of eternal personal trainers in feathered form. Modern scholars laugh it off, but you've seen the way they zoom in with confidence and taunt him just enough to keep the game going. It's all ritual, all rhythm. The Harpies swoop, Cerberus leaps. You duck under a falling feather that smells vaguely like ozone and vinegar. A skull-shaped bush bursts into blue flames after a misjudged swipe. The cycle continues. Then, like a DJ who knows when to change tracks, Cerberus stops, just sits, panting slightly, 3 tongues flopped out like droopy velvet banners. The Harpies take a final victory lap and vanish into the gray cackling. And Cerberus, he just watches them go, eyes thoughtful like he's wondering if they'll be back tomorrow. Spoiler, they will. Same time, same game every off-shift. Now he's calm again. You notice the asphodel grass has started to regrow in his paw prints already. The underworld has a way of resetting itself like a dream you can't quite hold on to. Historians still argue whether asphodel fields were meant to reflect ancient Greek ideas of purgatory, or whether they symbolized the vast ordinariness of most lives, neither heroic nor villainous, just lived. But to Cerberus it's his backyard, and he treats it as such. With a soft grunt he turns to you again. One head tilts slightly the way dogs do when you say walk or squirrel. He sniffs the air, picks up a scent only he can understand, and begins trotting toward a cluster of ancient obelisks rising crookedly from the fog. That stretch, that game, that was just the start of his day, and you'd better keep up. You follow at a cautious distance as Cerberus veers off the foggy path, paws, kicking up dust that smells faintly of sulfur and crushed thyme. The cluster of crooked obelisks ahead looms like broken teeth in the ground. Their scorched black etched with ancient names, long erased by time or by some moody underworld graffiti artist. Cerberus halts at the edge tail, wagging with anticipation. You hear it before you see it, the unmistakable shrieking cackle of Harpies again, but this time they're not alone. From behind the jagged stones, a whole squad of underworld misfits flutters, slinks, or hops into view. There's a skeletal jackal with ruby eyes, a cockatrice that looks like someone gave a chicken snake parts, and way too much caffeine, even a blind imp in a tiny beret. It's the Underworld Pets Club, and yes, Cerberus is their de facto president. He bounds into their midst, barking joyfully from all three heads. The skeletal jackal darts between his legs like it's late for something. The imp throws a jawbone like a frisbee, and Cerberus fetches it with surprising grace for a beast the size of a funeral barge. It's a party, just not one any living creature would ever want to RSVP to. A fringe papyrus from the island of Delos once mentioned a menagerie of forgotten beasts, said to meet beneath the roots of the world just outside Tartarus. Most academics dismissed it as allegorical nonsense, but here you are watching Cerberus nuzzle a manticore like they're long-lost cousins at a family BBQ, and you can't help but wonder what else don't the myths tell us. Cerberus takes his role here seriously. He plays gently, only occasionally vaporizing a bone when he gets overexcited. His three heads each focus on different companions, one tossing the bone back to the imp, one grooming the cockatrice's molting feathers with the care of a dog dad, and one watching the perimeter as always. Some habits die hard. The cockatrice lets out a yawn hiss and curls up beside a hot stone. The jackal settles in too, tail wagging faintly. The imp gives a sarcastic little salute and vanishes in a puff of pink smoke, apparently meeting adjourned. Cerberus doesn't move immediately. He lowers all three heads to the stone floor, chin resting atop scorched granite. It's a brief pause, a moment to soak in company, even the weird kind. You know that feeling when your friend group is a chaotic mess, but still your favorite place to be. Yeah, that's this. Historians still argue whether mythological beasts like these were ever intended to symbolize psychological states. Cerberus as trauma's gatekeeper, the manticore as guilt, the cockatrice as irrational fear. But if that's true, then what does this moment mean? A monster finding comfort in other monsters. Maybe it's just the universal need to belong. Suddenly Cerberus rises, shaking off ash from his shoulders. Playtime's over. It's snack time now. You can tell because all three heads have simultaneously started drooling in three-part harmony. He lumbers off, ignoring your slightly panicked scramble to keep up. You pass through a small glade of ironwood trees that rattle despite the absence of wind. Cerberus pushes through a curtain of withered vines and enters a space you'd never expect in this realm of gloom, and echoes a tidy, if gloomy, kitchen. Well, sort of. There are no walls, but it's arranged like a kitchen, a blackened hearth, floating shelves, held up by curses, and a countertop carved from some poor titan's discarded femur. And there, brushing phantom flower from her hands, is Persephone. The queen of the underworld gives Cerberus a nod, not breaking her rhythm as she slides a tray of, well, it looks like cookies, but they shimmer unnaturally and occasionally whisper. He waits, patiently tail-thumping, as she selects a few and tosses them in his direction. Each head catches one midair. You swear one says thank you, but it might just be your sleep-deprived brain making connections where there aren't any. Persephone gives you a glance as if to say, don't even think about it, and you wisely take a step back. Cerberus crunches down contentedly crumbs of glowing soul batter, floating down like fireflies. These are not your average Scooby snacks. The recipe is rumored to involve ambrosia ground moonstone, and this part's disputed a dash of tears from the river Charon. In a dusty side scroll buried beneath Delphi, there's mention of Cerberid treats, baked items prepared only during the off-season, meant to placate the guardian between judgment sessions. Most historians call it metaphorical. The rest point at passages like this and nod smugly. Cerberus licks his chops. One head gives Persephone a playful nudge which she doesn't acknowledge, but you swear the corner of her mouth twitches upward. A little. Then she vanishes in a swirl of underworld light, off to tend some cursed pomegranate grove or organize a ghost census, whatever keeps her busy. Cerberus trots off, energized now. You notice his gait is smoother, lighter. He's got his energy bar in. The triple heads are alert again, but relaxed, like three over-caffeinated lifeguards watching a lazy river. And you're starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, you won't get eaten today. Now that the snack has kicked in, Cerberus is buzzing. Not dangerously so. More like a toddler after a juice box. The kind of energy that can't be wasted on brooding or lurking or scaring lost shades. No, this calls for a full-body sprint. He breaks into a gallop, kicking up embers and dust as he charges across a cracked obsidian ridge, tail whipping like a banner. You hustle after him, nearly losing your footing on a pile of discarded memory vials. Don't ask. Not everything here makes sense to mortals. He's headed somewhere specific. Past the yawning caverns of the wailing senators. Past the twisted arch that hums the Iliad backwards. You're wondering if this is just a death jog when suddenly you hear it, the gentle trickle of water. Cerberus slows, paws sinking into soft, silvery mud. Ahead lies the river Lethe. It's one of the underworld's 5 rivers, and arguably the strangest. Lethe is the river of forgetfulness. Anyone who drinks from it or even lingers too long nearby starts to forget their name, their grief, their homework from 3rd grade. It just melts away. Cerberus knows better than to sip, but he loves the riverbank. The water glows faintly blue, reflecting nothing. Along its edge grows a kind of underworld moss, cool and rubbery like memory foam for the dead. Cerberus throws himself into it belly first, rolling with wild abandon. One head barks with joy, one head sneezes up a puff of green smoke, and the third is lapping up the river very carefully. Not to drink, just sample. You wonder what would happen if he forgot who he was. Would he forget how to guard the gates? Or worse, forget the rules? Historians still argue whether the Lethe was purely symbolic or an actual element in ancient Greek funeral rites. Some suggest the Lethe represented the peace of oblivion, others a curse. Cerberus doesn't care. He's using the river like a spa. He wades in up to his shoulders. Don't worry. The rules are different for monsters. The currents coil around him like silk ribbons, whispering fragments of lost memories. A woman who forgot her wedding day, a child who forgot her father's voice. Cerberus's middle head closes its eyes. For a moment you sense something heavy in him, some kind of weight he almost lets go of, and then doesn't. He shakes his fur and the moment vanishes. A quirky aside here: in a 3rd century inscription found near Eleusis, there's a depiction of a 3-headed dog soaking in what looks like a fountain labeled Mnemosyne's regret. Some fringe academics think this is a joke at Cerberus's expense. Others think it's a hint that he once drank from the Lethe and forgot. Suddenly, from the far side of the riverbank, there's a rustle. Cerberus freezes. A shimmering shape moves toward him, a shade in the vague form of another dog. Smaller, 2-headed, with a tail like a whip and one eye sewn shut. It's Orthrus. Your breath catches. Cerberus's brother. In life or in myth, Orthrus guarded the red cattle of Geryon until Heracles killed him as part of his never-ending chores. Some legends say Orthrus died and vanished, but others say Hades gave him a quiet corner in the afterlife, a place away from judgment, a place where Cerberus could visit. The two don't run to each other, they just sit, silent, one head from each lowering in quiet mirrored recognition. There's no barking, no pouncing, just presence. For a few minutes the river seems to still entirely. The wind dies down. The dead, for once, stay quiet. You realize you're holding your breath. This is grief, but softened with time. Siblings not torn by fate, but connected through what remains. Then, as gently as he appeared, Orthrus rises and retreats back into the mist, beyond the reeds. Cerberus watches him go, and you see it just for a second, a shimmer of all 3 heads, lowering at once, mournful and still. There's a debate, you know. Scholars argue whether Cerberus and Orthrus were metaphors for duality and multiplicity in the psyche, 2 halves of loyalty, fear, rage, and memory. But when you watch Cerberus rise from the riverbed and shake off that moment, like droplets of time, all you feel is one brother missing another. He nudges a pebble into the river, watching it vanish beneath the surface without a sound. Then, without a word, though let's be honest, he's never said one, Cerberus turns and walks on, not in a rush now, just thoughtful, measured. You fall into step behind him. Cerberus pads onward, each step stirring up a faint echo that vanishes before it settles. There's something new in his gait now, less bounce, more gravity. He's not mopey exactly, just quieter. But don't worry, that never lasts too long with a creature like him. Soon the terrain begins to shift. The smooth obsidian ground gives way to cracked tiles and scorched circles, burn marks from spells long since spent. Obsidian towers lean at odd angles like melted candles, and charred banners hang from rusted poles, each stitched with symbols no one remembers how to read. You've entered the arenas, and Cerberus, he's here for the finals. Welcome to the ancient Greco-Roman fetch league, where the Underworld's elite and eternally bored gather to compete in one of its most sacred non-sanctioned sports, supernatural fetch. It's part show, part chaos. The competitors' beasts, gods on probation, and the occasional overconfident shade. The objective: catch the obsidian disc midair, dodge the flaming hoop, avoid the exploding pillars, and return the disc without accidentally devouring your handler. Simple enough. Cerberus is a legend here. He's won the league 6 centuries in a row. Not that he brags, but you notice one of his heads raises a little higher as the crowd of ghostly spectators parts for him. The crowd isn't cheering exactly. It's more of a low, eerie chorus, like whales singing lullabies through a haunted pipe organ. You look around and spot Hecate as one of the judges twirling a torch, idly, clearly bored. Next to her is a jury of skeletal centaurs and one hyper-intense ghost with a clipboard. It's official. Cerberus takes his mark. A shade with a molten javelin steps into the ring and hurls the disc, a razor-thin circle of cursed obsidian, into the air. It arcs high, glowing red, trailing heat and dread. The flaming hoop appears mid-air, crackling with sparks. Without hesitation, Cerberus launches. All three heads lock onto the disc, each barking with precision. His paws barely touch the ground. It's a blur of fur, flame, and muscle memory. He loops through the hoop cleanly, not even singeing his tail, and snatches the disc with his center mouth just before it can shatter against the jagged wall. He lands in a controlled slide, dust spraying. The disc thuds to the ground, still glowing. The crowd exhales. He's done it again. There's debate among classicists whether ancient games in the underworld were ever mentioned in myth, but some point to scattered references in mystery cult rituals, strange trials, sacred competitions, and festivals of death where the rules were known only to the dead. One Thracian scroll even contains a chant invoking the triple beast who guards and games. Cerberus trots back, chest-puffed heads nodding in different tempos. One licks his shoulder, another tries to chew the disc, and the third growls warningly at a heckling ghost. Classic teamwork. Then he spots it. A new challenger entering the field, a massive snake-bodied hound with emerald eyes and too many teeth. You don't recognize it, but Cerberus does. He growls softly, almost playfully, and bounds forward. It's not just a match now, it's a rivalry. What follows is a spectacular back and forth. Discs fly, pillars explode, the flaming hoop splits into three smaller rings, and at one point the scoreboard melts. At one glorious moment, Cerberus fakes a lunge with one head, while another catches the disc from behind his back. Yes, behind his back. Somewhere Orpheus is composing a new epic just for this. By the time the final disc is caught and the last hoop fizzles into smoke, Cerberus is panting, his fur singed slightly at the tips. He looks exhausted and thrilled. The crowd, if you can call this collection of banshees, judges, and sentient fog a crowd, erupts in low-frequency applause. Hecate lifts a pinky in approval, which is basically a standing ovation coming from her. Historians still argue whether Cerberus ever had agency in the myths, or was merely a beast shaped by narrative necessity. But here in this moment he's nothing but himself, a creature of joy, instinct, skill, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of showmanship. Cerberus pads off the field disc, still clamped in one mouth-tail, wagging like a metronome set to victory. He's not doing this for points or fame. He just loves the game. You follow him as he exits through a scorched archway that hisses shut behind you, his steps slow, muscles visibly relaxing. It's time for something quieter, something a bit more still. You don't know it yet, but nap time is next. Cerberus has a swagger in his step now, the kind you only earn after launching yourself through a flaming hoop mid-air and catching an object that technically wants to bite you back. His fur is ruffled, his claws leave warm prints in the stone, and one head is humming what might be a victory tune, or burping, hard to say. You trail behind him as he veers away from the arena ruins and toward a strange red-lit horizon. The air grows thicker, heavier. You start to hear faint moans, not screams, more like exhausted sighs, echoing over hot stone. You've reached the fields of punishment. Now don't panic. Cerberus isn't here for punishment. He's here for the quiet. The underworld has its own kind of logic, and this is one of those twisted truths. Sometimes the most peaceful place to nap is right next to the eternally tormented. The fields of punishment are where the worst of the worst are sent: traitors, oath-breakers, and one guy who invented taxes. Think eternal time out, but with fire pits and rolling boulders. Tantalus is off in the distance trying to grab a snack he'll never reach. Sisyphus is halfway up the hill again. You wave. He doesn't wave back. But the real treasure here is the brimstone rocks. They're smooth, sun-warm despite the absence of a sun, and they hum faintly when touched. Cerberus finds his usual napping slab, a long, flat piece of volcanic glass shaped like a chaise lounge if a demon designed furniture. He circles it once, twice, then flops down with a full-body oof. Dust swirls. One head rests on the rock, one on his front paws. The third scans the horizon for a minute longer before relaxing too. You watch him unwind. It's oddly intimate. This is a creature made to terrify. He's the final barrier between the living and the lost. Yet here, he's just tired. Just a big triple-headed dog who's had a busy morning and needs a break. Each breath is a small earthquake. You swear the moans in the air soften a little, as if even the damned find comfort in his company. A curious detail in a few rare Etruscan burial frescoes. There are images of a three-headed hound sleeping beside chained spirits. Scholars debate whether this was artistic license or a nod to some lost belief that Cerberus didn't just guard, but comforted too. A monstrous lullaby for those who couldn't escape. One of his heads starts to snore low and steady, like the rumble of a distant storm. Another head twitches slightly, chasing some dream only he understands. The third mutters something like "bad squirrel" in a voice that sounds like crushed gravel. It's peaceful, in its own eerie way. You find a spot nearby, safely out of paw range, and sit. The warmth from the brimstone seeps into your bones. Despite the occasional scream echoing across the valley, or the sudden thunderclap from an exploding punishment wheel, there's a rhythm to it all, like ocean waves. If the ocean was made of pain and regret. Cerberus lets out a sigh, not a growl or a bark, just a sigh, all three heads. Perfect unison. It's the kind of sound that makes you want to lie down and sleep, too. You imagine it's what the wind sounds like in dreams. And then something strange happens. A butterfly flutters by. Yes, a butterfly. Pale, translucent, and shimmering like moonlight caught in a spider web. It weaves between the rocks, flitting past Sisyphus, who nearly loses his grip on the boulder watching it, and comes to rest right on Cerberus's middle nose. He doesn't move. One eye peeks open, sees the butterfly, closes again. No growl, no chomp, just stillness. Some ancient philosophers believed butterflies were souls in transition, not quite alive, not quite dead, a symbol of fragile passage. The presence of one here, even the underworld, has its moments of grace. Historians still argue whether Cerberus was ever portrayed as gentle in any serious myth. But a handful of sources, one fragment from a lost Orphic hymn, a line of Heraclitus misquoted out of context, suggest he had mercy and rest, that when not called to guard or devour, he simply was. Eventually the butterfly lifts off and disappears into the heat shimmer. Cerberus stirs, slightly stretches one back leg with a lazy thump, and settles again. His tail flicks once, sending a minor shockwave through a nearby punishment pit. You hear a distant voice shout, "Hey, you!" Sit beside him for what feels like an hour, or maybe 5 minutes. Time slips here. You don't dare speak. You don't even want to breathe too loud, because in this moment the terror of the underworld is just sleeping, and you somehow are safe. Eventually Cerberus stirs. Not abruptly. It starts with a twitch in one ear, a lazy flick of the tail that sends a pebble skittering off into a pit of boiling ink. One head lifts, blinking sleep from its eyes. Then another yawns, jaw cracking wide enough to scare sleep itself back into hiding. The third head grumbles something in a tone that says 5 more minutes, but the rest of him is already rising. The nap is over. He stretches again, this time with less ceremony and more creaky, satisfied groaning. There's soot on his paws, ash in his fur, and a faint shimmer of dream sweat sparkling along his back. You'd think sleep wouldn't be necessary for a being like him, but clearly he enjoys it. And really, what is immortality without a good nap? Cerberus gives the fields one last look. Somewhere a scream crescendos and cuts off mid-syllable. One of the dams slips on a wheel of fire and yells something unprintable. Cerberus watches it all like someone watching an old sitcom they've seen 1,000 times, fond but unimpressed. And then it happens. He perks up. All 3 heads snap to attention at once, ears high, nostrils flaring. Something's caught his attention. A sound you don't hear, a scent you definitely can't smell. But he can. It's her, Nyx Panther. You didn't even know primordial goddesses had pets, but here in the underworld the impossible is just part of the daily schedule. She emerges from the shadows without a sound. Liquid midnight draped in feline form. Her coat ripples with stars, constellations shifting across her back like a moving planetarium. Her eyes glow silver. She walks like the night itself is holding its breath. Cerberus is frozen. One head tries to play it cool, scratching behind an ear. Another licks its lips nervously. The third stares wide-eyed like a schoolboy with a divine crush. It's oddly endearing. The panther doesn't speak, of course. She doesn't need to. She simply prowls in slow circles around Cerberus' tail, flicking eyes never blinking. Her shadow slinks behind her like an independent creature. When she brushes past him, starlight sparks briefly across his fur. He stiffens, then relaxes, trying not to look too impressed. There are rumors deep in the footnotes of obscure Orphic hymns that Nyx, goddess of night, once gifted a fragment of herself to Hades. Not a weapon, not a token. A companion, a panther born of night, loyal only to the darkness and occasionally playful. And now she's here, taunting Cerberus with every graceful step. The hound tries to keep it together. He does a little prance. You've never seen a creature that massive try to be graceful. It's like watching a glacier attempt ballet. One head nudges a nearby boulder in her direction, a not-so-subtle offering. She doesn't even glance at it. Instead, she leaps, landing delicately on his back. Cerberus freezes, completely paralyzed. The panther perches between his shoulders, kneading lightly, with claws made of moonlight. And he lets her. He likes it, you can tell. For one absurd moment, you're looking at the most terrifying creature in mythology, getting a surprise midnight massage, and loving every second. Historians still argue whether Nyx and her creations played a real role in underworld mythos, or whether they were symbolic representations of sleep chaos and the unknown. But if the panther is symbolic, then Cerberus is definitely having some complex feelings about darkness right now. They sit together in stillness, no growling, no snarling, just a quiet understanding between 2 ancient beings who spend most of their lives being feared and misunderstood. You take a step back, not out of fear, but out of respect. This is their moment. Eventually, the panther dismounts with impossible elegance, brushing her tail along Cerberus's spine. He shivers slightly. 3 heads, 1 reaction. She vanishes into the shadows without a sound, like a dream you almost remember upon waking. Cerberus watches for a long beat. Then he exhales 1 long, lingering sigh from 3 mouths. His shoulders relax. His tail wags once as if confirming yes. That just happened. A faint grin tugs at one head's lips. Another tries to look nonchalant. The third just stares after her as if replaying the moment on mental loop. Crushes, it seems, are universal. He shakes off the stardust and trots forward with new energy, maybe even a bit of swagger. You smirk. Some parts of life or unlife don't change no matter how many heads you have. And Cerberus, he's already on to the next thing. You follow Cerberus as he makes his way through a winding trail of jagged basalt teeth, tail flicking with something between pride and bashfulness. It's like watching a teenager try to act cool after locking eyes with their crush, if that teenager was a three-headed hellhound who once bit a hydra in half for fun. Ahead, a flicker of red light begins to pulse through the gloom. A sulfuric breeze wafts past, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of scorched ambition. You're approaching a strange little underworld oddity, the Furies' grooming salon. Yes, you heard right. Nestled between a cursed grove of petrified fig trees and a bottomless pit labeled Lost Decrees, there stands a crumbling but shockingly well-maintained ruin. Hanging above the cracked doorway, a crooked sign etched in blood-red runes. Translated loosely, it reads, "Snips and Sins, Eternal Beauty, Eternal Judgment." Cerberus approaches with the kind of reluctant enthusiasm you only ever see in someone going to the dentist who also offers free cookies. Inside, it smells of incense ash and lemon-scented brimstone. The Furies, Alectomygaera and Tisiphone, are flitting about like gothic barbers with vendettas. Each wears a toga smeared with irony and possibly blood-wielding shears that whisper as they cut. One of Cerberus's heads lets out a low whine. Another stiffens up like a soldier awaiting battle. The third looks mildly excited, probably the same head that likes bubble baths and licks thunderclouds. Megara gestures dramatically. "Back already? You're molting again, aren't you?" she says, her eyes glinting with dangerous glee. Cerberus lowers himself onto a fire-warmed obsidian slab, positioning his limbs expertly. He's done this before, a lot. One Fury starts brushing the bramble out of his mane, another snips off a burned clump from his back leg. The third, ever the artist, begins applying what might be enchanted conditioner, possibly made from ghost essence. You watch, stunned, as this mighty beast, this legend of myth and terror, gets his nails filed. Alecto hums a tune older than time. Tisiphone polishes one claw until it gleams like a mirror into your worst memory. Megaera scolds him gently for chewing on his own tail. Cerberus looks away sheepishly. One head yawns with exaggerated innocence. There's a niche debate among Hellenic historians over whether the Furies truly punished only the wicked or also offered restorative justice. A small camp of scholars argue they doubled as caretakers for tortured souls. And apparently three-headed dogs. It's not just maintenance, it's ritual. You can tell this is more than a spa day. It's how Cerberus resets. A moment of vulnerability. Three heads with three different preferences, somehow agreeing on one universal truth. You can't guard the gates of hell looking like you've been dragged through a demigod bar fight, even if you have. Occasionally, the Furies whisper secrets into his ears. Things like, "Don't trust the singing skulls," or "The river Styx is up 2 degrees this week." He listens with half-lidded eyes, soaking it in, like gossip from terrifying ants you love but never cross. Fringe myth suggests Cerberus may have once dated a Fury. No name is given, just a cryptic vase inscription that reads, "The hound and the winged flame bound by fury and fur." Interpret that however you like. Eventually the pampering ends. The final touch. A glowing rune pressed gently onto his chest, a charm to keep his fur from singeing too easily. It pulses once, then fades. Cerberus stands fully refreshed. Groomed, preened, fluffed in all the right places. He gives the Furies a respectful bow, three heads dipping in perfect sync. They wave him off, muttering about next month's molt and the matted tail incident of 312. You follow as he pads out, looking somehow both majestic and adorably pleased with himself. He struts just a little like someone who's been told they have a great jawline and is trying to act like it's no big deal. One head glances back and gives you what can only be described as a smug look. You're not sure whether to laugh or bow. The fires of the salon fade behind you, and the underworld's twilight gloom wraps around you again. But now Cerberus glows faintly, like someone turned the brightness up just a notch. And next he's due for a little emotional maintenance too, because when your job involves snarling at eternity and keeping dead people from sneaking into the wrong afterlife, you need more than sharp claws and a clean coat. You need a good listener. You barely have time to catch your breath before Cerberus takes a sudden turn, veering down a steep spiraling staircase carved directly into the cliffside. No guardrails, no signage, just darkness and an occasional glowing eyeball embedded in the wall. You follow cautiously, one footstep at a time, as the temperature dips and the air takes on that distinct boatman musk. You've arrived at Charon's dock. It's eerily quiet down here. The river Styx flows past in long, oily ribbons, wide and still, like time held its breath. No wind, no birds, just the slow creak of old wood and the occasional splash of something you really hope never surfaces. Charon's skiff bobs lazily in the current. It's made of bones, mostly human, some artistic flair thrown in with bits of bronze, and a flag stitched from faded burial shrouds. And there he is, Charon himself, lounging on a crate, chewing something that could be a reed or maybe a soul-shaped toothpick. He doesn't speak as Cerberus approaches. He just nods. A rare courtesy. Cerberus steps gingerly onto the dock, massive paws somehow silent on the creaking planks. One head bobs in greeting. Another stretches out and rests on Charon's knee. The third curls around and stares at the river, lost in thought. This is therapy time. Now Charon isn't a talker. He's a listener, a watcher, and somehow, despite his skeletal cheekbones and eternal poker face, he radiates a kind of calm. The kind you get from someone who's ferried every emotion to its end point and knows exactly how to sit with grief, rage, or boredom without flinching. Cerberus begins to whine softly, not a sad whimper, but the kind of low, looping sound that says this has been a lot. You don't speak his language, but you get the gist. All three heads take turns exhaling. One head leans into Charon's side, eyes closed. The second stares into the river, perhaps remembering a soul he didn't chase. The third nuzzles a worn rope that smells faintly of Persephone's kitchen. Charon sits, silent, present, not judging, not. Maybe keeping track of Cerberus's woes in his mind, maybe not. Occasionally he offers a scratch behind the ears, or where ears would be, if not replaced by magma vents and bone plates. Historians still argue whether Charon had any real personality in myth, or if he was just a symbolic tool, death's Uber driver. But a few obscure sources, like a half-erased fresco in a Roman tomb, depict him and Cerberus seated together by firelight, sharing a drink, in silence. Companions, co-workers, maybe even friends. You sit too unsure if you're supposed to witness this, but too curious to leave. Charon eventually reaches into the folds of his cloak and pulls out a tarnished bronze mirror. No reflection appears in it. Instead, it shows memories, fleeting flashes, a lost soul offering a final coin, a hero limping home, a child asking if heaven has dogs. Cerberus watches mesmerized, each head taking in something different. They don't speak, but their posture shifts. They lean forward, then lean back. You get the feeling this is how he remembers who he is. Not by guarding, but by remembering what he guards. Eventually Charon sets the mirror aside. No dramatic finale, just a sigh from both of them, one hollow and echoing the other, triple-throated and bone-deep. Cerberus nudges his head against the boatman's side one last time. And that's it. Therapy session over. No one claps. No one hands out tissues. But you feel it, the weight that lifts ever so slightly from the hound's shoulders. He rises, refreshed in a way that grooming never could offer, and with no fanfare he leaves the dock tails swishing behind him like a punctuation mark on a sentence no one speaks aloud. You follow the floorboards, creaking just enough to make you feel noticed, but not unwelcome. Cerberus doesn't look back, but Charon does. One glowing eye meets yours. It holds your gaze for a long second, quiet, curious. Then he tips an invisible hat, turns away, and vanishes into mist. And once again the Styx flows silently on. By the time you catch up, Cerberus is padding through an alley of jagged stalagmites, each one humming softly with residual magic. Whatever emotional weight he left at Charon's dock, it's clearly made room for something lighter, something fabulous. Because tonight, it's fashion show night. That's right. Welcome to Hecate's Underworld runway, where death meets couture in a spectacle no mortal will ever see, and probably couldn't process if they did. The venue is a cathedral-shaped termone carved from shadowed quartz, with glowing rivers of light trickling through its arches like living veins. Souls line the sides of the obsidian catwalk, whispering in tongues and holding up glowing sigils in place of cell phones. And from backstage, underworld icons line up in armor made of sorrow tunics, of stitched lamentations and accessories that hiss when touched. Cerberus enters like a seasoned pro. He's not even walking, he's strutting, shoulders rolling, tails swaying, heads held high, ears perked, eyes glinting with confidence. One of his heads flashes a grin that would curdle nectar. The middle one gives a sultry growl. The third snorts at a heckler and keeps moving. His ensemble, a triple-collared harness etched with ever-shifting infernal runes, draped in netting spun from the threads of fates who've quit their day jobs. Each collar bears a medallion pulsing with stolen time. His claws have been polished to obsidian points. His fur glimmers like fresh oil slicked over midnight. You blink and realize he's owning this. Hecate, goddess of crossroads and fierce aesthetics, watches from her judge's throne with 4 glowing eyes and a goblet that probably contains liquefied starlight. She sips slowly, nodding with deep, silent approval. One of the other contestants, a ghost in a toga made entirely of burnt contracts, tries to upstage him with a flaming boa. Cerberus responds by breathing a perfect smoke ring from each mouth and then walking through them in rhythm. It's not even close. Some fringe texts, especially those from necromantic cults in Anatolia, describe the Hound of Beauty, a creature who appears to judges of the dead during solstice rituals, wearing garments woven from screams and silence. Most mainstream historians ignore it, but if any of them saw this, they'd start revising footnotes immediately. Cerberus reaches the end of the runway and executes a perfect spin, all 3 heads making eye contact with 3 different judges. The crowd, if you can call a moaning mass of semi-transparent admirers, a crowd goes. You spot Persephone again watching from the shadows. She raises an eyebrow, hides a smirk behind her goblet, and disappears once more. She knew this was coming. Backstage, Cerberus makes the rounds, accepting compliments with the grace of a seasoned model. A minor demon tries to pitch him for a cursed fragrance deal, essence of Afterlife. He ignores it. Fashion is an art, not a brand. You find yourself wondering, how many times has he done this? It seems like a routine, a rhythm, like even a beast made for guarding gates and shredding souls needs a chance to express himself now and then. Historians still argue whether the gods ever allowed mythic beasts their own personalities beyond their function. But the truth is, myth is shaped by retelling, and what gets left out often says more than what gets preserved. Tonight, Cerberus isn't a guardian. He's a muse. Eventually, the music, a haunting symphony of lyres and whispering regrets, fades out. The cavern dims. The runway dissolves into mist. One of Hecate's familiars slinks by to hand out judging scrolls which vanish unread. Cerberus stretches his collars, now humming more softly. The glamour fading, he looks satisfied. And then he does something unexpected. He bows. All three heads lower in perfect synchrony, not to the crowd, not to the judges, but to the empty center of the runway, as if paying respect to something unseen, maybe to past selves, or the version of him the world will never know. He straightens up, tail swishing one final time, and strides into the shadows. You scramble after him, your feet echoing against quartz and memory. He doesn't speak, he never does, but there's something different in the way he walks now. Not tired, not anxious, just radiant. Because even in the underworld, where time stutters and souls groan, everyone deserves a place to shine. Even the monster at the gate. Cerberus doesn't look back as he leaves the glowing catwalk behind. His paw steps fade into the crunch of bone gravel, the sound oddly comforting in the way only supernatural footfalls can be. The glamour from the fashion show seems to fade like mist off his fur, leaving behind just the bare, unadorned beast, still massive, still terrifying, still somehow weirdly relatable. You follow as he winds through a path that seems to shift behind you. Wasn't that twisted arch over your left shoulder a moment ago? No matter. Things rearrange themselves here. Time and space are more like suggestions in the underworld. Cerberus stops at an outcropping of cracked stone where flickers of starlight dance in and out of shadow. There's a shimmer at the base, an outline you almost miss. A door. Not a metaphorical one. An actual, literal, unauthorized glowing portal. And standing beside it, hands on hips, and looking far too pleased with himself, is Hermes. You recognize him instantly, winged sandals, slightly smug expression, and that eternal bam of someone who just escaped a lecture by inventing a fake emergency. He twirls his caduceus lazily, then grins. Well, 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 if it isn't my favorite three-headed gentleman, he says. Cerberus wags his tail once, just once, and sits. Welcome to unauthorized portal hopping, a little-known tradition among the more mischievous immortals, and Cerberus's occasional hobby when he feels like breaking the rules just enough to avoid divine write-ups. Hermes gestures toward the portal, which shifts like liquid mirror glass, showing flashes of strange places. 1 second a hallway lined with glowing scrolls, the next a mountaintop library made of lightning. The next a half-sunken temple surrounded by giant frogs wearing monocles. You blink. It's gone. Just a quick hop. Hermes winks. In and out. No judgment. No paperwork. Cerberus snorts through all three noses. Hermes laughs and pats him on the flank, ignoring the singed hair he picks up in the process. Last time you almost made off with a Sphinx's crossword puzzle. Let's try to behave this time, yeah. Cerberus steps through. The world blurs. You feel your stomach do that inside-out roller coaster flip as reality briefly forgets what gravity is. For a moment, everything is light and sound and possibility. And then just like that, you're standing in Atlantis, sort of. This version of Atlantis looks like it's been rebooted by a team of confused architects and sea-obsessed poets. Coral towers rise and fall like breathing lungs. Jellyfish float by, humming faint jazz. A dolphin wearing glasses glares at you disapprovingly. Cerberus trots ahead, all three heads swiveling in opposite directions, sniffing curiously at the glowing kelp vendors and phosphorescent fruit stalls. Hermes pops in behind you, already munching on something that may or may not be ethical. You should have seen him the first time, Hermes whispers. Barked at the moonfish for 20 minutes straight. Thought they were mocking him. Cerberus catches sight of a floating platform covered in enchanted seafoam pies. One head lunges forward. Hermes zaps it lightly with the caduceus. no theft. We're guests. You wander through the bizarre bazaar for a few more minutes. Cerberus tries on a bioluminescent scarf. It flickers wildly. One head loves it. Another sneezes. The third glares at both and tosses it into a passing whirlpool. There's something odd here, not dangerous, just unsettling. It's like everything around you has been copied from real memories, but rearranged by someone who's never seen a table. And just when you think Cerberus has finally relaxed, Hermes tugs his collar gently. Time's up, big guy. With a final sniff of a telepathic anemone, don't ask, Cerberus steps back through the portal. You follow the sea echoes collapsing behind you like a dream shutting its own door. Back in the underworld again. Same stones, same gloom, same dull scent of regret and charcoal. Cerberus gives a shake, spraying sea droplets in a perfect arc across the bones at his feet. Hermes shrugs, gives a little salute, and vanishes mid-wink. Historians still argue whether Hermes ever broke the rules to ferry gods or monsters through forbidden places. But if these detours are real, and you're pretty sure they are, it paints a very different picture of Cerberus. Not just a warden, not just a beast, but a seeker. A creature who wants to know more. He's back on the familiar path now, tail calmer, heads a little more thoughtful. He walks ahead, not hurried, not dragging, just moving forward, because sometimes even monsters need a little mischief. Cerberus walks with renewed energy now, as if the brief excursion through the unauthorized portals hit the reset button on all three of his brains. One head hums quietly, another sways gently, almost dancing. The third glances at you as if to say, bet you didn't see that coming, huh? You didn't. He leads you toward Tartarus, but don't worry, he's not going in. He's covering for someone. Because even ancient underworld prisons need security rotations, and every now and then the regular guards, horrible, unnameable creatures, with too many eyes and very strong opinions about union dues, call in sick. And when that happens, Cerberus pulls a double shift. The entrance to Tartarus is a place that shouldn't exist. It's not carved or built. It's more like a wound in the world. The rocks don't go around it, they bend away in fear. Wind doesn't blow here. It just stands still, unsure whether it should keep moving. Chains the size of city walls hang like frozen lightning bolts, and the gates, they aren't made of metal. They're made of regret, twisted and hardened into jagged, groaning slabs. Cerberus approaches the main perch and sits. Slowly, one head gazes downward into the abyss. One listens for vibrations. The third gnaws gently on a bone left behind by whoever was on shift last. It's still warm, gross, and so begins his temporary post as Tartarus security. The Titans are down there, old gods, the kind that make Zeus look like a nervous intern. Their prison cells are concepts, not rooms. Endless falling, eternal blindness, perpetual reruns of bad memories. Not a place for tourists. Cerberus watches over it all in eerie stillness. Minutes pass, or hours. Time here twists. A booming groan echoes from below as if a mountain just stubbed its toe. Cerberus doesn't flinch. One head does sigh, though, like a parent hearing the same bedtime complaint for the 4,000th time. He rises only once when a ripple in the ground hints at a possible escape attempt. Something massive shifts down there, something old. The kind of thing that makes nightmares need nightlights. Cerberus growls, all three heads in perfect harmony, and whatever it was, it stops. He sits again satisfied, order restored. You start to wonder if he enjoys this. Not in a sadistic way, but in that focused, comfortable way some people enjoy solving puzzles, or organizing their weirdly large sock collections. There's something peaceful about keeping chaos locked in its box. Fringe scholars occasionally theorize that Cerberus was never really meant to guard the gates of Hades, but Tartarus itself. That the myths misplace his role, confuse him with later editions, overlook the fact that only something truly ancient and trustworthy could stand near the prison of gods without losing its mind. After a while, something unexpected happens. A knock, yes, a knock, on a gate made of regret. Cerberus turns. It's a delivery. A shade in a black apron stands at the edge of the chasm, holding a takeout bag. "Lunch for big guy," he mumbles, avoiding eye contact. Charon says it's from that new spot on level 9, flaming marrow dumplings. One of Cerberus's heads growls, another drools, the third snatches the bag with a bark of approval. The delivery guy bolts. Can't blame him. The food smells divine and infernal. It sizzles as it's unpacked. You swear one of the dumplings whispers a prophecy before getting eaten. Even here, in the deepest part of the underworld, the little routines continue. Eat, watch, growl, repeat. Cerberus munches quietly, eyes always watching, always alert. He doesn't need praise, or medals, or statues, just a decent snack and the knowledge that the Titans aren't going anywhere tonight. Eventually another ripple stirs through the stone, this one friendlier. It's a signal his shift's up. The regular guards are back from their union meeting or whatever eldritch rituals they were doing. Cerberus stands, stretches, and gives the abyss one last warning glance. His message is clear, still watching, still hungry. He turns and leaves without fanfare. No one claps, no one thanks him, but that's the job, and he does it better than anyone. Cerberus is back on the main underworld loop, now walking with a bit of a lumber in his step. Not from fatigue, he could wrestle a minotaur after a nap, but from something subtler, a kind of low-level ennui. Even the dead have routines, even the monsters get bored. And when that happens, there's only one solution, ghost stand-up comedy night. Yes, it's a thing. Down a side corridor carved from limestone and old confessions, past a flickering torch stand labeled "Abandon all puns, ye who enter," is a wide amphitheater called the Cracked Amphora. The seating is mostly mist and memory, the crowd semi-transparent and semi-bored. This is where spirits go when they've died too many times to take things seriously anymore. Cerberus is a regular, and tonight he's performing. He trots backstage, if you can call a chalk-drawn circle a backstage, and takes a long look at the crowd, a mix of philosophers who never finish their arguments, warriors who still think they won, and one satyr who's clearly lost. A shade with a clipboard nods solemnly. "You've got 5 minutes. Try not to eat the hecklers this time." Cerberus nods once. One head sneezes, another paces, the third quietly practices punchlines. He steps into the spotlight cast not from fire or magic, but from a nervous candle held aloft by a whispering wraith. "Ladies, gentlemen, and genderless fragments of regret," the announcer bellows, "please welcome Cerberus." Polite applause, a few groans. One guy boos from under a cowl labeled "Former Oracle," and then he begins. Cerberus doesn't talk, at least not in words, but he performs. Body language, tail flicks, choreographed head movements, his delivery is spot on. The first joke, a bit of physical comedy. He mimics a mortal trying to bribe him with a single coin. He pants, he droops his tongue, one head mock cries. The audience chuckles. They get it. Next comes impersonations. Zeus demanding entry to the underworld in a toga, 2 sizes too small. Head 1 does the thunderbolts. Head 2 does the ego. Head 3 just burps. Laughter grows. Then a classic bit. You know you've been dead too long when the Furies start bringing you socks for your birthday. The crowd howls. Cerberus spins in a lazy circle and dramatically chokes on a soul, that wouldn't stop talking. Everyone in the front row goes transparent from laughing too hard. Historians still argue whether humor existed in the afterlife, or whether it's a modern invention projected backward. But ancient graffiti from tombs in Corinth depict jokes scratched into walls, bad puns about sphinxes and taxes, suggesting the dead have always had a sense of humor. Morbid, yes, but funny, definitely. Cerberus continues building up to his closer, a three-headed reenactment of Orpheus's exit from the underworld. One head sings off-key, one plays air lyre with his paws. The third dramatically turns back at the last second, screaming, "But I forgot my lyric sheet." Absolute pandemonium. The crowd loves it. Even the oracle guy chuckles and mutters something about workshopping that line. For a moment, the whole room feels lighter. Fewer chains, fewer groans, more joy. The kind that can only come from laughing at your own doom and finding it funny anyway. Cerberus bows, all three heads in sync. The candle flicker spotlight dims. He exits the stage, tail wagging modestly. Backstage, a ghost comic in a toga nods appreciatively. Solid set, man. They love the head choreography. Cerberus lets out a happy rumble, snags a bone-shaped snack from the green room table donated by Hades himself. He loves comedy nights and trots off into the shadows again. It's strange, isn't it? This hound bringer of fear, ender of mortal journeys, also tells jokes. And good ones. Maybe that's the point. Even in the deepest places, humor survives. Even among the dead, laughter echoes. And who better to tell those jokes than the one who's seen every soul come through the gates? Cerberus doesn't laugh much himself, not audibly, but there's a bounce in his step now. He's lighter, looser. One head hums, another head rehearses new material for next week, and the third, it just smiles. Cerberus has clearly shaken off whatever gloom might have clung to him. He's practically skipping now, well as much as a hulking, triple-headed beast of myth can skip. His paws crunch over a gravel path made entirely of failed prophecies, and the occasional ghost sighs from beneath his footfall. You'd think a soul would avoid getting stepped on by him, but this is the underworld. Some folks are into that. Next on his off-duty itinerary, shade hunting. Not for fun, not for food, for work. Well, let's call it light freelance tracking. Cerberus may be on break, but he's still got a reputation to maintain. Every once in a while, a few particularly restless souls decide to test their luck and escape. Or try to. It never works, but they do make good cardio. So when Hades sends out a quick thought pulse, kind of a metaphysical, "Hey, someone slipped past level 4 again," Cerberus listens. He likes the chase, the challenge, the idea that someone thought they could outsmart him. He sniffs the air, all three noses flare, one head licks its chops, another narrows its eyes. The third stares off into the gloom like it already knows exactly where the escapee went. You jog beside him as he picks up the trail, his pace quick and purposeful. He's in tracker mode now. The underworld shifts around you, reacting to his urgency. Fog thickens, walls lean aside, a skeletal lamppost flickers into flame without prompting. Even the lost shades pause in their wandering to give him a respectful distance. The scent trail is odd patchouli, an ink O. It's one of the poets again. Cerberus rolls his eyes. At least one of his heads does. He hates chasing poets. Sure enough, you round a corner and spot a pale figure dashing across a bridge of withered bones, clutching a scroll and muttering something about unfinished metaphors. The ghost leaps a small crevice, knocking over a signpost that reads, "No escape, no exceptions." Cerberus snorts and bolts after him. The chase is on. He doesn't bark, he thunders. His paws strike the ground like a war drum. Each head leads a different angle of pursuit, predicting turns. estimating jumps, reading the rhythm of the runner's panic. The ghost looks back, big mistake, trips over a memory stone and tumbles end over end like a poorly written simile. Cerberus skids to a perfect stop, leans down, and picks up the poet gently in his jaws. Not biting, just retrieving. The poet wiggles dramatically, reciting something that sounds vaguely iambic and very doomed. One of Cerberus's heads sneezes, another sighs. The third gives the ghost a light shake, less punishment, more dog with a slipper energy. Back you all go. The return walk is slow, almost ceremonial. The ghost is dangling from Cerberus's mouth, still mumbling poetry, and occasionally fainting from his own melodrama. When you reach the proper containment zone, a softly glowing pen labeled Eloquent Offenders, Cerberus plops the ghost inside and shuts the gate with his paw. The poet recites a final line, and so by hound return to pen, I wait to dream and write again. Cerberus gives a dry look, all three heads simultaneously, then turns away. Historians still argue whether Cerberus truly hunted souls, or if that was added later as moral spice. Some records say he let many ghosts wander freely, especially those who amused him or told good stories. Others suggest he was merciless. But the truth seems to lie in the middle. He doesn't hate the escapees. He just enjoys proving they're wrong. Besides, it's good exercise. As he pads away from the pens, Cerberus seems oddly proud, like he's checked a box on his invisible to-do list, sniffed out a rebel, returned order, saved the underworld once again from a dramatic spoken-word emergency. And you're breathless, not from fear, from awe. There's more to him than teeth and fire. Cerberus is a problem solver, a peacekeeper, a mood manager, a three-headed therapy dog with a side hustle in mythological law enforcement. He doesn't howl in triumph. He doesn't wait for applause. He just keeps walking. And the underworld, watching silently from every crack and crevice, lets him. Cerberus's stride slows now, not from fatigue, but from anticipation. There's a hum in the air, a faint rhythm that pulses up from the ground like someone far away is tuning an ancient instrument. His ears perk, all six of them, because it's time. Elysium's DJ night. Yes, that's a sentence you didn't expect. The Elysian fields, typically imagined as soft, glowing meadows, where heroes and virtuous souls lounge eternally under perfect skies, has, unbeknownst to most, one night a week where things get a little groovy. It started with Orpheus, of course, after being famously terrible at following basic instructions. Don't look back, Orpheus. How hard is that? He negotiated a soft gig in Elysium. No more harrowing adventures. Just music, healing, and when the mood strikes raging, lyre sets under the ghost stars. Cerberus takes a winding shortcut through a tunnel made of petrified laurels, pushes through a mist curtain, and steps onto the plush grass of the fields. You can hear it now, plucked strings, slow drums, vocals that echo with more reverb than should be legal. Souls sway gently under softly pulsing lights. A grove of trees is strung with silver ribbons that vibrate with every beat. And their center stage, on a floating stone platform, is Orpheus himself, half shadow, half showman, strumming a lyre with a body of flame and strings made from God knows what. Cerberus moves through the crowd like royalty. Shades part. A few clap. One offers him a glowing flower. He eats it. Everyone pretends that was completely normal. Tonight's theme, eternal chill wave. Cerberus has a role here. He's not just a guest. He's the main act's percussion. That's right. Every few bars he lets out a carefully timed low growl, just one from one head. It rolls across the meadows like thunder wrapped in velvet. Orpheus times his rhythms to the rumbles. Another head joins in with a howl so harmonized it sounds auto-tuned. The third head keeping the beat with a tail thump like a baseline heartbeat. It is magic. This is more than music. It's therapy for souls who've been through it, the quiet heroes, the forgotten saints. That one farmer who saved a village and never told anyone. They sway to the rhythm, finally relaxing, finally remembering who they were. Orpheus leads the melody, but Cerberus grounds it, three voices, adding depth that no lyre could achieve alone. You stand off to the side, awestruck. You've never seen a being of such destructive potential be this creative. The three heads move in unison, heads tilted slightly toward the sky. He's not guarding, not hunting, he's creating, collaborating. Historians still argue whether music had power in the underworld, or whether it was used as control, as in the case of Orpheus's earlier tale. But fringe thinkers propose a deeper idea that the dead crave not silence, but resonance, sound that affirms they still exist. Cerberus's voice is that resonance. When the final note lingers in the air, fading into the stars, the crowd doesn't cheer. They exhale. A long collective sigh, like a weight has lifted. Like they've been reminded they're more than their endings. Cerberus bows his heads. Orpheus gives him a nod, equal parts respect and gratitude, then fades into mist, his lyre's last note hanging like a firefly in the dark. Cerberus trots off the stage and into the field, where a few shades nuzzle his paws or offer glowing fruit. He accepts, nipping gently. No growling, no snarling, just a being of myth making music with ghosts under impossible stars. You walk behind him, still absorbing what you saw. He may be made of nightmares, but tonight he gave the dead something no one expects from monsters' joy. Cerberus leaves Elysium glowing figuratively and literally, since some of that ambient light from the DJ set still clings to his fur like ethereal glitter. His paw prints shine faintly with every step, trailing stardust across the obsidian floor as he exits the grove. All three heads seem content, like they've just had a good stretch, a warm bath and a standing ovation from a crowd of immortal spirits. But as ever, rest in the underworld is brief, because it's time for his annual checkup. Yes, even mythological beasts need health care. The path winds downward again, deeper than most souls go, toward a glowing doorway carved from bone and trimmed in laurel. Overhead, a sign reads, Asclepius Clinic, holistic healing for the mythically inclined. Inside, the scent hits you first, burnt sage, river clay, and that strange, sterile tang of polished gold. The waiting room is half full, a cyclops with a sore eye, obviously a dryad sneezing leaves, and a chimera reading a scroll on herbalism while nervously licking one of her own tails. Cerberus strides in like he owns the place. Asclepius himself emerges from the back, tall, calm, radiating retired god-turned-chill health guru energy. His robes are spotless, his hands steady, and his hair tied back in a way that suggests he's good at acupuncture and conflict resolution. Ah, he says, smiling as he adjusts his stethoscope, which is definitely made from snakeskin and possibly sings lullabies. My favorite patient. Cerberus sits. The table groans under his weight. One head droops, another pants. The third eyes the thermometer with grim suspicion. The checkup begins. First, weight. All three heads get weighed separately, then collectively, because underworld bureaucracy is nothing if not thorough. Next, temperature. You wince. Cerberus winces harder. The thermometer vanishes into a puff of smoke when it comes back out. You don't ask where it went. Then come the reflex tests. Asclepius taps each knee with a malachite rod. Cerberus's legs kick automatically, once flipping a coffee table, once smacking a satyr in the waiting room. Apologies are exchanged. He gets his ears cleaned again, 6 ears. His eyes checked. His teeth counted, all 128 of them, including the ones he grows seasonally. Asclepius makes calming noises while poking a glowing lump on Cerberus's flank that turns out to be a pocket of bottled lightning. Ah, that explains the twitching. Historians still debate whether divine creatures required care or simply evolved endlessly, but votive offerings found at healing sanctuaries little clay models of paws, tails, and three-headed figures suggest people once believed even the most terrifying beings needed healing. And Cerberus, he clearly enjoys this part of the routine. Sure, he snarls at the thermometer and hates the scale. But when Asclepius brushes his fur with a silver rake and murmurs soft chants, all three heads go floppy with contentment. The center one drools slightly. One head starts to snore. The third gives a tiny tail thump with every brushstroke. This new shampoo has bits of ambrosia, Asclepius notes, combing out what appears to be a trapped curse. You'll smell like Afterlife citrus for a week. The final step, a magical scan, a glowing sigil that hovers above Cerberus, whirring quietly as it reads his soul density, memory coil, and emotional entropy. It flashes green, perfect health. Asclepius smiles and scratches under one chin, still terrifying, still magnificent. Cerberus yawns 3 times. You'd think he'd be embarrassed, but honestly he looks proud. He hops down from the table with an elegance that betrays his weight. Asclepius hands him a treat, charcoal and honey, compressed into a bone shape, and Cerberus crunches it with delight. He turns to go, tails swishing, energy restored. Same time next millennia, Asclepius calls out. Cerberus barks once in response. As he exits, the waiting souls give him respectful nods. Not out of fear, but admiration. Because if even the Underworld's top dog takes time for self-care, maybe they should too. You step into the corridor behind him, the glow from the clinic fading as the shadows return. He's polished, primed, checked, and cleared, which is good. Because what comes next, it's chaotic, sticky, adorable, and nothing could prepare him. Cerberus emerges from the clinic looking like he just walked off the cover of Underworld Monthly Monster Edition. His fur gleams with the subtle shimmer of ambrosia conditioner, and his claws click rhythmically against the obsidian walkway, echoing like a metronome of menace. One head sneezes out a tiny spark. Another head yawns, and the third, probably the fun uncle head, tilts upward, catching the faint whiff of something new. Very small, because yes, it's time for Underworld nursery duty. You didn't expect it. He certainly didn't volunteer. But once a cycle, Cerberus makes a surprise appearance at the nursery to help entertain the freshly arrived spirit kids. Those few young souls who were granted early entrance to Elysium or needed a softer landing into eternity. Souls too gentle for judgment, too innocent for torment, and definitely too energetic for the afterlife to handle unsupervised. You follow him through a veil of whispering lullabies, into a cavern bathed in warm golden light. It's filled with soft black moss, instead of rugs floating orbs of music, and shelves stacked with toys that reshape themselves, depending on who's looking. There's a faint scent of cinnamon and wood smoke. Somehow, it's the coziest place you've seen in the Underworld. And then, they spot him. The kids, dozens of them, glowing faintly, wearing fragmentary echoes of their earthly clothes. Some giggle, some squeal. One points and yells, "Doggy." Cerberus freezes. This is the worst part. The moment of decision. Will they scream in terror? Will they cry for their mothers? Will one of them throw something sticky? But no, they rush him. The first soul kid latches onto a front paw, wrapping tiny arms around it, like he's hugging a warm boulder. Another climbs up his back like he's a sentient jungle gym. A third manages to wedge herself between two heads and declares, "I live here now." One head goes cross-eyed trying to see her. Another gently nudges her off. The third sighs deeply like he knew this day would come again. And yet he stays perfectly still, not growling, not snarling, just letting it happen. Because this is a thing now. Every century or so, some new caretaker asks, could Cerberus stop by for story time? And somehow Hades says yes. And somehow Cerberus shows up. One of the Underworld's most feared guardians now has a line of tiny spectral children arguing over who gets to braid his ears. He lowers himself slowly onto the moss floor, curling his massive body into a loose spiral. Kids flock to the center. One plops down on his tail like it's a throne. Another begins pretending to fly, using his back as a launch pad. The rest just nestle in warmth, seeking little satellites. And then the real miracle, the ride. Cerberus starts walking in gentle circles, slow measured loops around the cavern. The children squeal with delight. It's like an undead carousel, but with more drool. Historians never talk about this. You'll find no frescoes of Cerberus with toddlers in tow. No vase paintings showing him curled up like a puppy while a ghost child pokes his nose. But in a papyrus scroll buried under an Elysian shrine, there's a faded inscription, "The hound who guards also guides." The roar may rock, but the breath may soothe. Scholars think it's about Hades. They're wrong. Cerberus finally settles back down, and one of the spirit kids stands, clears his throat, and says, "Okay, now," he tells the story. Cerberus tilts his heads. Another kid nods solemnly. Yes, he does voices. And so with great theatrical flair, Cerberus begins. He doesn't speak, not with words, but he performs. One head acts out a giant bumbling minotaur. Another mimics a shy nymph hiding in a tree. The third head handles dramatic wind noises and an admittedly solid impression of thunder. The kids are entranced, laughing, clapping, occasionally sliding off his back and scrambling back up. He finishes with a bow, an actual sweeping bow, and a puff of harmless flame for dramatic effect. The crowd goes wild. One kid gives him a cookie made of dream stuff. He eats it without hesitation. Eventually the lights begin to dim. Soft lullabies return. It's bedtime for the newly dead. Cerberus stands slowly, carefully, like he knows any sudden move might wake the entire room again. One last tail flick sends a tiny sparkle drifting upward, where it joins the glowing ceiling stars. He pads out of the nursery as the children drift to sleep, snuggled into his paw prints. You glance back and see a tiny chalkboard scrawled with jagged handwriting, and honestly, you agree. The air shifts again as Cerberus leaves the nursery, softer, heavier, like the underworld itself is tucking the kids in. His gait slows now, less from fatigue and more from the kind of lingering warmth you only feel after doing something unexpectedly wholesome. But don't be fooled, he's still the terrifying hound of the afterlife, and his break is almost over. One more ritual remains before his shift begins birthday watch. Not his birthday, Cerberus doesn't technically have one, but every so often a mortal soul arrives in the underworld on their birthday. And not just any mortal, a child, a warrior, a poet, a gardener, someone who was born, died, and somehow circled back to that exact cosmic mark all in the same day. It doesn't happen often. When it does, the underworld takes note. And Cerberus, he delivers the ride. It starts at the gates of the fields of recollection, where souls wander through memories the way mortals wander, grocery stores, confused, distracted, looking for something they can't name. Tonight, a flicker of gold flares above one of them, a shimmering crown of starlight blinking with the number 0, a symbol of the full loop. Cerberus spots it instantly. He trots over, tail flicking. The soul, a small figure wrapped in shadowy silks, pauses. No fear, just curiosity. The soul nods. Cerberus lowers himself to the ground, motioning for the figure to climb aboard. You've seen this before back in the nursery, but this is different, slower, more solemn. Cerberus becomes less guardian and more ferryman now, less beast, more ritual. The soul mounts his back resting between two shoulder blades, the heads turned forward, eyes glowing just slightly in the gloom. And then they ride, not run, not gallop, they glide. The underworld shifts for them, stones melting into clouds, echoes turning into music, every step like a bell chiming in reverse. They pass landmarks, the river Lethe shimmering silent, the obelisks of forgotten names, the cliff where souls come to scream privately. Everything glows for just a moment as they pass. This is Cerberus's gift, one quiet journey, one complete circle for the soul whose life and death met on the same breath of time. You trail behind quietly, respectfully, as they reach a stone circle with no walls. Inside are seats made of fossilized lullabies. The soul dismounts, bows, and sits. For a moment they look up into nothing, and yet everything. A stillness takes hold. Cerberus steps back. Not even he disturbs the circle. Historians rarely mention birthday souls. It's considered a coincidence, a myth layered onto myth. But in a scratched mural in an old temple ruin outside Thebes, there's a faint etching, a three-headed dog standing watch as a robed figure stares into a sky drawn in gold. Even down here something remembers. Cerberus stays until the last golden flicker fades from the soul's head. When it does, he bows, all three heads dipping slowly deeply. Then he turns and walks away, leaving the soul in peace, cocooned in their moment. You don't speak. There's nothing to say. The underworld isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about closure. Cerberus leads you back into the main corridor. The echoes grow sharper again. Chains clink faintly in the distance. A scream floats by, routine stuff. He's almost home, but before he reaches the gates, he stops one last time. There's a shallow pool beside the path, one of the underworld's lesser-known landmarks. Not cursed, not sacred, just reflective. A place where beings like Cerberus, immortal, unsleeping, never praised, can catch a glimpse of themselves. He steps beside it. Three heads peer into the water. He sees himself. Not the monster the poets described, not the snarl and the gore and the gatekeeper of doom, just himself. Three minds, one soul. A creature who guards, chases, protects, guides, tells jokes, tucks in kids, checks escape routes, rocks parties, and sometimes just needs a moment. The reflections ripple, and Cerberus exhales like he's giving something to the water, maybe the weight of the day. Maybe a memory, maybe a wish, and then he turns toward the gates. Cerberus approaches the gates of the underworld once more, his 12 paws falling into a slow, steady rhythm. The echoes of his journey trail behind him like faint incense, whispers of laughter, dream songs, runaway ghosts, flaming hoops, bedtime stories. Each step takes him closer to his post, but also further from the fleeting freedom of his off hours. The gates loom ahead, obsidian arches entwined with roots of the first tree ever forgotten, laced with curses older than language. Twin braziers flare to life as he nears, casting jagged shadows across the stone. The scent here is different, older, like the breath of time itself. Before he crosses the threshold, he pauses, because this moment, the return, is always the strangest. Off-duty Cerberus is a different creature. Not a disguise, not a mask, just another layer. But now he has to slip back into the role the myths gave him, the one the mortals still whisper about, the one etched on coins and carved into tombs, the hound at the gate. One head looks back just briefly, toward everything he did on his time off, the nap, the chase, the fashion show, the laugh, the child who fell asleep on his shoulder. Then he faces forward and steps back into position. The gate pulses with recognition. It senses him, his essence, his purpose, and unlocks with a deep, groaning sigh. It doesn't open. It accepts. Cerberus plants himself at the threshold, front legs braced, tail lowered, eyes sharp. 3 heads lift, scanning in 3 different directions. Guard mode activated, but look closely. One head's ear still has a tiny braid in it, courtesy of a nursery kid. The shimmer of Elysium still clings faintly to his mane. He smells like ghost cookie crumbs and healing oils. His claws have been polished, his heart slightly fuller. Even when he's on duty, these traces of his other self remain. And though his face is stern now, though he looks every bit the gatekeeping terror from the legends, there's something behind his eyes. Not sadness, not regret, just depth. Because here's the secret no one tells you: Cerberus is not just a guardian of what enters. He guards what's already inside. He carries the stories, the little joys, the unexpected kindnesses. He holds them in his many hearts, not to hide them, but to remember them. Historians still argue about the nature of Cerberus. Was he a mindless beast, a loyal pet, a prison warden, or a metaphysical construct? But you know better now. He's all of it, and more. You watch as he settles into place. The stillness returns. The wind shifts. Somewhere far behind you, another soul begins their journey. Cerberus doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. He's home. The underworld carries on around him now, its rhythms ancient and unbothered. Cerberus stands like a monument, as he always has, unmoving, unyielding, and somehow unspoken. Most souls never realize he sees them. They shuffle past, eyes low, clutching their tokens, or regrets, or unfinished prayers, but he notices every single one. And more than that, he remembers. Each of his 3 heads has its own kind of memory. One keeps track of those who begged, one recalls those who walked in silence, and the third remembers the ones who smiled. But even as he guards, even as his paws dig into the familiar grooves in the blackened floor, the echoes of his off-hours hum faintly inside him. Tonight, as he stares out across the dark plain that leads to the mortal world, he's remembering a moment from long ago, longer than even the myths recall. A time before Heracles tried to drag him upward, before poets dared rhyme his name, before even the gates had shape. Back when the underworld was just a stretch of unlit space and Cerberus was new. He remembers curling up beside a lake of glass, alone but not lonely. No tasks, no legends, just instinct. And then a figure, tall, robed, crowned in shadows, Hades himself. There was no command, no leash, just a silent understanding. Guard this, the god had said, not with words, with presence. Cerberus hadn't needed further instruction. He simply walked beside the gates and stayed. He chose this, not because he was told to, because someone had to. And now, countless centuries later, the job continues. But tonight, the echoes of his day off dance gently through his heads like a breeze through 3 open windows. He can still smell the Lethe riverbank, still hear the Harpies cheating at tag, still feel the tug of a spectral child's hug around his foreleg. He guards, but he also hopes that maybe tomorrow night he'll get another break, another chance to chase shadows, tell a story, or bark laugh at bad puns. Maybe Orpheus will spin again. Maybe the ghost poet will make another run for it. Maybe the Panther will return. Cerberus shifts slightly enough to settle the weight across his limbs evenly. A small piece of Elysian flower crumbles out from between his toes. One head snorts. Another head raises an eyebrow. The third head, that one, smiles just a little. Historians never include these details, but if they did, maybe they'd understand. He's not just the end of the road, he's what waits at the end of it. Not to punish, to witness, to protect what's already lost, and maybe sometimes what could still be found. Behind him, the underworld breathes. In front of him, the world of the living blinks uncertainly in the distance. And in between, unmoving and patient, is Cerberus. Always. There's a moment now, quiet, complete, when everything settles. The souls shuffle in steady lines. The river flows without ripple. The torches at the gate flicker in rhythmic patterns, casting their light over Cerberus's massive form as he stands poised and calm. This is the part of the night that belongs to no one. Not the living, not the dead, just him. The final hour before his break ends. The first hour before it begins again. And during this sliver of time, Cerberus watches not the dead who come, but the space between them, the pauses, the near silences, the places where nothing happens but still matters. It's his favorite part. He stretches slightly, every joint clicking like tectonic plates sliding into place. One head lets out a long sigh, a soft cloud of steam puffing into the air. Another head blinks slowly. The third is already scanning the horizon again because someone has to be on duty. Behind him, Hades stirs faintly in his throne room, not rising, just aware. The gods don't sleep, not like mortals, but they have their own rhythms. And Hades, he trusts Cerberus with everything. No leashes, no commands, just presence. Cerberus settles into position, his paws aligned with grooves in the stone carved by centuries of waiting. The gates flare once as if acknowledging their guardian, then fall still. And then, as if pulled by some invisible tide, his mind begins to wander. He replays moments from his off-duty hours, not because he's longing for them, but because they remind him of who he is when he's not just the monster in the myth. He sees the spectral child curled against his side, whispering a bedtime story of their own. He hears the laughter of the audience at the Amphora Comedy Club, the ghosts clutching their translucent ribs as he reenacted Orpheus's terrible timing. He remembers the shimmer of stardust left behind by Nyx's Panther, still glowing faintly near his collarbone. He replays the feeling of warm river moss beneath his belly, the echoes of Orpheus's melody pulsing through the air like heartbeat and light. And he feels something else, something no poem ever captured. Peace. Because for all the tales told about him, all the horror, the snarling, the blood and fire, Cerberus has always been more than just a beast at the gate. He is the pause between stories, the stillness between lives, the presence that asks nothing but remains. He doesn't wish for more. He doesn't dream of escape. He has seen all that the underworld contains and found within it a strange kind of joy. And now the cycle turns again. His muscles still, his eyes sharpen. One head begins to growl low, another listens closely, and the third narrows its gaze at a new arrival stepping cautiously toward the gate, a soul fresh from the mortal world, shaking, silent, clutching their final coin. Cerberus lowers his heads slowly, not to scare, to acknowledge, to welcome them gently into the world beneath the world. Because that's the truth no one ever writes on marble or carves into stone. Cerberus doesn't stop the living from entering. He helps the dead feel less alone, and he always will. And now, as the underworld fades into the background, and Cerberus resumes his place in myth and shadow, your own breath slows with his. You feel the weight of centuries settle not as a burden, but as a blanket. Warm, familiar, calming. The echoes of his off hours linger, drifting like feathers through your mind. A nap on brimstone, a bark in the fog, a smile shared with a child no one else could carry. You picture him now motionless yet ever watchful, a creature forged from fear but softened by quiet rituals and forgotten moments. 3 heads rising and falling with every breath, each one dreaming different dreams, perhaps. Or maybe the same one. You don't have to understand all of it. You don't have to remember everything. The myths will keep changing, the scholars will keep debating, but Cerberus, he'll still be there, at the gate, with patience in his paws, and kindness yes, kindness in his many eyes. So rest easy now, let the darkness hold you not with fear, but with peace. Let your own thoughts settle like ancient dust across a stone floor. Let sleep take you softly as if carried on the back of something once feared and now understood. Good night, traveler. You are safe. Cerberus is watching.